Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, where next week our guests will be Ben Franklin and Aretha Franklin. Sorry, I couldn't resist. We are a podcast that talks about old movies that we enjoy or don't enjoy, or enjoyed at the time and maybe not so much now. And on that note, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey is this week's film. This is an interesting one, Chris.
It is. What's your? Because I have no history with this film. Because this is the first time I've seen it. What is your history with? Because I remember when we talked about Bill and Ted, I seem to remember you being quite positive about this film. Did you have? What's your history?
So I think the first Bill and Ted I saw, I think I talked to this on the original podcast in school. Like our history teacher just put it on when I'm gonna say because he had a hangover that day. I mean I don't literally mean that. I don't know, but he basically didn't feel like doing an actual lesson, so he wheeled in the TV VHS player and put Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure on. But the class was shorter than the movie, and we never saw the remaining half. So I ultimately, it was just a madness. That was just an insane thing. So then, and at some point, I feel like another lesson someone threw on this as well. Like this is something else I think I saw part of in school. But what's weird is I had a weird memory of catching at least part of this one, the second one, and knowing who Bill and Ted were through the existence of this movie before the first. And I was trying to sort of piece together why that might be. And I think what happened was that I may have seen like the sort of second half of this movie while channel surfing one day, prior to then seeing the first. So that when the first got put on at school, I kind of at least knew who Bill and Ted were. So I think my actual history is that maybe I saw at least a chunk of this one first, because I seem to remember coming in on them playing games with death and being amused by that and then sticking with it. And then later on seeing Excellent Adventure in the context I described in the original podcast. But I'm not 100% sure. It's all a bit fuzzy, so I don't know exactly. But I was a big fan of both these movies. And I think there was even a period in time where I would have told you this was my preferred Bill and Ted movie, with nostalgia goggles on. And I think the reason that phenomenon happens, and I did some Googling to see, because I found like a Reddit thread, and it was someone asking, which Bill and Ted movie do you prefer? And it was from pre-Face the Music coming out. And predominantly, Bogus Journey was the answer. And I think that's really interesting, because I think Excellent Adventure holds up significantly better than Bogus Journey. And I wonder how many of those people had watched them recently. I think Bogus Journey eats out, unfortunate phrasing, but I think it sort of wins. It succeeds in being creative enough that you then have this nostalgia for its creativity and the things it sort of can do that maybe the reality of the movie doesn't quite match up with. Because one of the things we complimented the first movie for doing was having a really simple but quite effective message about, be excellent to each other. And we came back to that a bit, I think, in our review, because we sort of said everyone in the modern day hates Bill and Ted, but when they start going through history, every historical person they meet, they're nice to them, so they come with them on the adventure to help them, because they're nice to them. And the lesson of the movie is just be nice to people. And while that's not a particularly complex message, it functions, and it's got a nice theme, it's got some good jokes, a bunch of historical stuff, then they end up at school, they do the big presentation, everyone's happy. It's a fun movie, and it's pretty straightforward. And I even remember thinking around the time we did that review, wait till we get to Bogus Journey, because it's just craziness, but like in a fun way, like really fun craziness. And rewatching it, I couldn't help but feel the craziness of 2 is maybe a lot more shallow than I remembered. And while it is very creative, I think adult Dan has had a very different experience than young Dan. So young Dan, and maybe teenage Dan, and maybe even early 20s Dan would have told you this was a really, really incredible movie. Absolute classic. Holds up to the first one. An example of a great sequel. Modern Dan, having just rewatched it, not as convinced of that. So that's sort of headline thought. Well, we'll cover recommend, not recommend in a little bit. But how did you feel watching this for the first time? and what were your expectations having seen the first one?
I don't know if particularly I guess expectations. I just sort of assumed it would be a sequel to Bill and Ted. And feeling the spirit of the first one, I guess. I was expecting kind of that again. I think the first one does hold up better as and this is going to sound more critical than I mean it to, but as a movie, I feel the first one holds up better. This film. Talk about journey. It just, I said to Dan off air the other day, I felt watching it, because I've seen it twice. We were going to record and then we changed recording date. And thank you again to Dan, because that was for me that we changed it. And I'd watched it about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, whenever we were meant to record. So I was like, I'll watch it again. Mm-hmm. And the first time I watched it, I was really struck by how it felt like if all the roles that aren't Bill and Ted in this film were played by famous actors who had been nominated for the MTV Awards that year, this film would feel like the sketch, a long version of the sketch at the beginning of an award show. Where it's just like, it's whoever going through all the TV shows of the day or doing this, that, or the other. Like, it feels so meandering and it feels so all over the place. There's robots, they're dead, they're in hell, they're in heaven, they're back on Earth. Like, it's like, wow, okay. And it literally just felt like, in terms of... just it being all tied together, it felt in some ways more like a collection of scenes. Now, you can argue that that's quite typical of a road trip movie, and I think you can make an argument out of that. But it's particularly, I think, because the exploits are so such big ideas. Like, it literally feels like someone's in the writer's room going, oh, they die and then they go to hell. Well, how do they get out of hell? Well, they play death at battleships and a bunch of other games. Okay, okay, but then what happens? Oh, well, maybe they go to heaven and try and find a scientist to help. Oh, maybe wouldn't it be fun if there was an alien? Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, let's do that. Like, it just feels like there were no limits. And I think even though the first film is very fanatical, whatever the word is, fantasy led. It's fundamentally. Yeah, fundamentally it's about time travel. Oddly, the first film feels slightly more grounded than this film. Oh yeah. I don't know if they sort of took the leashes off a bit too much. And you're kind of left with this film that just goes from one thing to the other. I can see why, as a child, you enjoyed it. I absolutely can, and I did enjoy it as an adult.
And it's worth saying, it's not just child me. It's very common, it seems, for people to think this is the better movie with hindsight. And I think that is really, really interesting, because I think it is categorically not the better movie. And I would be surprised if we showed this movie next to the other one to the people that said that, if in modern times, and were like, just go back and re-look at these, would they feel the same way? Because I think the answer is no.
I think it's interesting, though, because I'd have to rewatch. It was a long time ago we did Bill and Ted, right?
Yes.
But I feel like Bill and Ted is Excellent Adventure is the better movie, without a doubt. In terms of which movie I enjoyed more, in terms of which movie I'd say was my favourite, I'd have to rewatch Excellent Adventure to check. Because this film, I think, is a little bit more accessible, and I think I feel like I laughed more at this film than I did the first film, and I feel like this film was a bit more easygoing, maybe to some degree as well. It's just a bit of a roller coaster ride. So I think there's flaws in it. I don't think like I say, I think the first film is without a doubt the better movie. But based on my own watching of it, I can kind of see why people might prefer this one. It's just, because think about it, if you like that sort of approach, if you like that whimsical, and if you like the pitch, it's Bill and Ted, but the wheels are off and they just don't give a fuck what they're doing, then you might go, oh yeah, okay. It's the same with obviously it's two very different types of media, but as some people, for me, Search Party, those first two series are absolutely the better series of that show. But, I think it's the third or the fourth. Whichever one it is where, the reins are off and they just go
I love
crazy.
Those seasons, but that's just me. I love those insane seasons.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying. But I think even you couldn't deny that as a crafted piece of television, the first two seasons are better. But you're sat there going, well, maybe. But personally, I think maybe I might prefer those later seasons where the wheels are completely off. Maybe it's a version of that here. Maybe, I don't know.
But I think
and maybe you wouldn't say that about.
I was going to say, I think what's interesting about that perspective, and I do think you're right. I think maybe maybe I'm being sort of like too presumptuous by saying, and I bet if you ask those people to watch them again and check, they would disagree with their preference of Bogus Journey. You might be right. Maybe it is just that much more sort of light and fun and easygoing and just like a rompy that overrides Excellent Adventure. But the reason I question I think that might be the case for some people, not for others. And the reason I think that is because, yes, it's rompy and fun, but it absolutely fundamentally fails to be a film about anything. And I think that's such a big crime. I think that's really, really hard to, no matter how rompy and fun you are, to get over. This movie blew me away with how pointless it ultimately is. And I mean that in like the strongest terms. Like, the first movie had a simple message, but a clear one. It had a simple premise, but a clear one. This movie, the thing he says at the end, when he gets on the mic, so the whole premise of this movie revolves around, they're going to make a speech at Battle of the Bands that the world sees, and it helps set them on that path to uniting the world through music, which is, what the first movie was about as well, was making sure they stay on that path. But what he says on the microphone is, the best place to be is here, and the best time to be is now. Sorry? That's the message? That's the thing that unites the world? That? Is it? Is it that? Now, I know that Face the Music, obviously, even if you've seen just the trailer for Face the Music, it's about them writing the song that unites the world. But that's obviously retroactively playing off the end of this, doing a little bit of unpicking of the ending of this movie. So that which is fine. They're silly movies. They're not to be analysed too in depth. But I guess what I'm saying is, this movie couldn't even be asked to just have them on the stage at the end and say, be excellent to each other. Which would have been fine by me. Even that, I would have just gone, oh, okay, same message as the first one, fine. I just couldn't believe how flat that felt when it actually happened. And while you're right, the actual journey is enjoyable for its rompiness, I couldn't get over how at the end of it all, when it was all said and done, it sort of might as well have not existed. And that was such a surprising thing to discover about this movie.
So I couldn't remember this about the first one. Does the first film end with the implication that the performance at the end is the performance that changes the world?
No, because at the end of that one, they're not performing music, they're just doing their history report. It's on a stage, which is confusing.
So to be fair, I think because I actually quite like when all the cameras turned to.
Oh, I like that idea.
Yeah, I like the idea that we were
idea.
sort of going full circle and we were going to see
yes.
the impact it could make. I think if we're going to talk about cheapness, there's potentially the bigger problem that they went away for a year off camera and came back suddenly, and that was how they fixed them not being good.
I honestly don't mind that. I think that's fine. I think that because I'm just because they finally decided they're going to actually commit to learning and they put the time in. We didn't see it, but we didn't need to see it. I was weirdly okay with the we're going to time travel to give ourselves 18 solid months of guitar practice so we can do this Battle of the Bands.
I think there's no version of that last speech that will live up to the hype of changing the world. I think it's a good speech.
No, but they could have tried.
Work, but...
I'm sorry. He says the best place to be is here, and the best time to be is now.
Yeah, you just got to make people live in the moment, Dan, and that's what he's saying in that.
Okay. That is a nothing. That might as well be like just noises, because that is just meaningless drivel.
I don't know, man. I think it's fine. Like I genuinely think the speech is fine. It's just it doesn't. I think in some ways what might have even been better is if they almost don't show it to the audience or don't show one element. So give that speech and then cut away before they play, and then just have all the headlines say it was the most phenomenal set in the world, and the music really made people listen to the message, something like that. But to be honest with you, dude, in a film where like I say, where the solution is a series of, well, we went back in time and we did this, and when you've got the alien building robots in the back of a van out of stuff they picked up in Walmart, although actually to some degree that makes sense because they're scientists. But do you know what I mean? Like it is in line with the rest of the movie.
Now I see. The thing is, I do disagree on that, because I think events that occur are, by definition, from the minute this movie opens, absurd. That is absolutely fine. The movie can do absurd stuff, like aliens making robot Bill and Teds from parts they buy, Death being the bass player, even the slight twist on we went for, back in time and left this for ourselves, because that they do something different with that than they did in the first movie, which I found that to be passable. But the absurdity of the movie is baked into the movie. What I'm saying is that fundamentally, if the movie still has to be about the thing it says it's about at the end of the day, regardless of the tone of the movie. If this was like a really serious science fiction movie, right, and it didn't do any of those absurd things, I would still have this problem with this premise, because what they've done is they've told us this is the speech that puts society on this path to essentially being like a utopia where everyone is nice to each other and society has fixed itself, and all he says is live in the moment, or a shadow of that. I just think again, be excellent to each other would have been enough for me. But they fundamentally failed to pay off the literal premise of the movie. That's different than using an absurd premise to sort of, defeat the bad guy, or an absurd premise to defeat the other robot Bill and Ted. That, because the movie's plots are absurd and the way that they unfold is always absurd. But when he says the best time to be is here, the best time to be is now, that's a moment where the movie is trying to be sincere to resolve the thematic premise of the movie, which it doesn't do. It doesn't land that at all. And that is such a painful thing to experience as an adult. I was like, that is not functional.
Why do you think be excellent to each other is so much better?
Because I don't believe saying to people, live in the moment, would do anything. Whereas I believe people actually learning to treat each other with respect and be nice to each other, even though it's a simple message, actually, I believe one of those two sentences could actually improve the world if people believed it because of the power of the music. And I think the other one is just a nonsense thing. That I think it's a sort of nonsense shite you get on like a Facebook picture next to a picture of a nice tree, and it's in like a really twirly font. The best time to be is now. The best place to be is here. It's just horseshit. It's the absolute worst possible shite you could do. And I'm not even saying be excellent to each other would be the absolute solution. I would have preferred something even more than that if they could find the time for it. But I think be excellent to each other would have been passable, whereas this wasn't.
Yeah, especially I think it just needs more in general. If you have be excellent to each other, even then I think you need you need a paper headline that says the music was so hypnotic that people
right.
went about their lives listening, being excellent to each other or something like that. Maybe
Yeah.
that would work. I think I don't know if there's a piece of dialogue you could make work without doing like a 5-minute speech. But I think if you had a headline, even what they've currently got, if we didn't hear the music or only heard part of the music, and it said, the music was so amazing, it hypnotized the world into being excellent for each other or living in the moment, whatever, I think that would make it all work a lot better. I think there's a slight weight to be excellent to each other in what has happened since. But I take your point that out of the two sentences, if I was choosing one for people to live by, it would be excellent to each other.
But I think the other issue, and this is a bigger one, it is the first movie, be excellent to each other. They literally learn it through the movie, right? They go around and they succeed because of the lesson they learn. So the best place to be is here, the best time to be is now, is so vague. Like any events of the movie, you could go like, oh, I guess that is linked, sort of. But this movie has a sequence where they literally go to their own personal hells. And what do we learn about these two characters? We learned one stole some eggs when he was a kid and felt bad about it at Easter, and the other one didn't want to kiss his grandma because he found her a little creepy and scary, right? As a child. How have we, couldn't they have overcome something there, even a simple thing, that would teach them a lesson that they then would repeat in, if the lesson spoken at the end had any real tangible relevance to any of the events of the movie, as well as the other problem. It's not just that I don't believe that message would work. It's also that it doesn't really tie into any of the events of the movie. Whereas in the first one, we very deliberately saw these two characters learn, not that they start out as terrible people that want to shit on everyone, but that movie very much reaffirms that they succeed because of their kindness. They get the help they need from those historical figures because they're nice to them. Do you know what I mean? Those people trust them immediately. They don't even pretend... in the first movie, they don't even pretend to be from each time they appear in. They're just like, hey, dude, so great, we're from the future. Do you want to come with us? And because they're nice, he's like, all right. It's one of those weird things where, and I know it's Socrates, for anyone who doesn't remember, they call him Socrates in the movie. It was a callback. I just realized that if anybody doesn't remember that as part of the movie, they'll think I'm an idiot. I'm going to cover it. But that movie, you see them learn the thing that they then say at the end of the movie, and I was just like, oh, that works. It all ties together. The events of the movie feel less pointless. My initial point regarding this ending was how it made the whole thing feel like the events of the movie were inconsequential. And that's, I think, a big part of why. I don't mind any of these absurd plots, but I think you've got to tie it in somehow, right? That ending has to come from what the events that followed it. Otherwise, we really are just random thing. And all those random things are fun. But you have to, again, all you need to do is just tie it together slightly at the end of the movie, and I'm happy, I've won. That's all I need. It's not a lot.
They don't learn anything. I think you can argue they don't. That's the thing. The film title has journey in it. The journey is to get back to the starting point at the start of the movie. Yeah. Their whole goal is they've just proposed, they've just said yes, they want to get back to that. And so it's literally I don't know what, like you say, I don't know what the lessons are, I don't know what the tie-in is. Yeah. And that is why, again, I think the first movie is for me, undeniably a better movie, because there are themes, there are resolutions. This is literally event after event after event. You could argue maybe death has gone on a bit of a journey. Seemingly he doesn't go back and start, I don't know, maybe death's softened a bit. There's sort of the implication that no, because even the parents, they arrest the villain, but there's no sort of, actually, you don't need to join the army or whatever. I've got a question for you about that, Chris. Just on the army point, just while I remember, because I'm going to forget, because I don't think it's in my notes. Why do the army want these two knuckleheads? The guy's all oh, they'll get you in the army. I'm like, why do you want them? They're useless. They have no discernible skills. What do you want them for? I genuinely spent most of my first view, because I also watched the movie twice just to sort of make sure it's fresh in memory for this particular recording. I spent most of my my first viewing wondering that question.
the army I even want with these guys? But I have but like looking at like it's what's frustrating I think about the way this ending functions for me is it's so close, because if you look at like the story circle, there's a goal, they cross a threshold literally to set off on this journey by being killed, where they have a goal, they search, they go through their trials, they sort of find something about themselves when they are forced to face themselves, they return. But they haven't. The very last step of the story circle is having changed, and I think it's so weird that this movie hits that. And I should clarify actually. Sorry, the story circle is Dan Harmon invented thing based on the work of Joseph Campbell, which is based on work of other people who've done sort of critical analysis of storytelling structure, and he sort of simplified Joseph Campbell's work into what he calls a story circle. But basically, most stories fit within the guidelines of the story circle, whether they intend to or not, because there's just a certain pattern. It's a very vague outline. It's not by page 20 your character needs to have done this or anything like that, but it's like just a general gist of how a story should function to be satisfying. And it so specifically fits this movie until it doesn't, and it's right at the end. And that's what's really interesting. Their lives have changed, they have not. So yeah.
It's just not as tight, is it? It's just not as it's not as thematic. But again, I did have a good time. Like I did find it funny.
We can do that now. We can have the chat about it. Because one thing I will say about this movie, right, and I really love about this movie, and we'll get off the thing that the major element of the movie's storytelling that didn't work for me, because I've more than beat that point into the ground. But to talk about the fun stuff and the stuff that works, what I really respect about this movie is not wanting to rest on its laurels, because I really remember distinctly something you said when we reviewed the first one, and it stuck with me. You watched the trailer for the second one after you watched the first one, and you said, why aren't we just doing time travel again? There's enough scope in... You didn't phrase it exactly like this. I don't remember verbatim what you said, but you basically said there's enough scope in time travel as a premise. Why do they need to go to hell? Because that's kind of in the trailer. And one thing I resisted saying at the time, and I get to say now, I finally get to respond to this point like 4 years later, 5 years later, whatever it is, because we covered that as it was like the 11th or 12th episode of this podcast. What I love about this movie is it didn't just do another time travel plot. Time travel's involved. It kind of has to be. That's just kind of like in the nature and but the idea that this isn't a time travel adventure in the way the first one is, and it tries to go sort of more the supernatural rather than the science fiction, is actually a really bold and refreshing choice. And it solves a problem a lot of sequels struggle with. We've talked about a lot of sequels, particularly this year, but we've covered sequels in general across our time doing Rewind reviews. And a recurring problem with some sequels that do not function is just doing the first movie again. Die Hard 2 is my gold example of this. It's just, the movie suffers so much from having no originality whatsoever.
I think the bigger case of that, because I've got a soft spot for Die Hard 2, the bigger case of that is The Hangover Part 2, which is quite literally the first film.
You're right. But I mean, to be fair, I was kind of thinking within the pantheon of movies we've covered. But yes, you're absolutely right. Hangover Part 2 is another absolutely classic example of that mistake you can make. So what I will say very much in my praise of this movie is I actually really love that the writers just went with this and didn't question themselves and didn't do the safe thing of just doing another Bill and Ted Go on a time travel adventure movie. And I think there was even originally talk of something similar like that. So the original idea for this sequel was an English class assignment, and Bill and Ted had to get classical... they had to enter classical works of literature. They got a device that took them into the stories. So they went into Romeo and Juliet and Tom Sawyer and Crime and Punishment and met characters from that to then do a big sort of book report at the end of the movie, and they learned across the movie. But I could not imagine anything less interesting than that for a sequel to Bill and Ted. And I really love this movie's just balls to the wall. You were describing it at the beginning of the movie as like they were just like, let's try this, yeah, why not? Let's do this, yeah, why not? And I'm just like, yeah, why not? Because the thing that makes this movie sing, the thing that really does make this movie still very entertaining to watch, even with my disappointment at how it's turned out as an overall film in Modern Eyes, is just the joy of like you can. If someone's watching this for the first time, there's no way they're predicting scene to scene what's happening in this movie. Zero. It's not happening. So I love that about this movie. How did you feel like as a sequel, but especially in the context of what I was just talking about, like with sequels that have sort of failed? How did you feel like this worked?
Yeah, it's hard to judge because I've seen the first film once ages ago, but I think I do echo what you just said. I respect that they do something different. Like I say, although it's a criticism of it as a film, it meandering from thing to thing again. And I've said this about other films. I do quite like sometimes when you watch something, like so in terms of like. That's a critique. In terms of enjoyment, I do get a kick out of watching something which feels like it's you and your friends making stuff up when you were kids. You know, when you were kids, and it was like, oh, let's pretend we're being chased by a lion. Oh, now the lion's an alien. Like, you know, it's sort of the embodiment of that in some ways. For me, it had the humor, it had the heart of the first film to some degree. Like, well, no, it did. Like, all of this has the caveat of my memory of the first film not being particularly strong, other than the fact that they're played by different actresses. Quite clearly, you know, there's still the love there for the princesses. I like the fact that they didn't just sort of write that story off. I assume there's triv as to why they didn't come back. And I believe they were also not back for the third film. I believe those two roles have been played by different actresses each time.
A third set of actors. I kind of like the idea that now if they did a fourth one, they'd almost just, even if the two actors from Face the Music were available, I think they just have to recast them again. I kind of think like I just think you have to. I don't think it's possible to do anything else.
So yeah, no, I quite like that it did something different. It worked for me as a sequel because fundamentally Bill and Ted felt like the same characters. I could have done with more George Carling, but I
add that to any sentence ever for the rest of time.
Well, exactly that. Yeah. So, but I thought equally. The death role was fun and a good a good alternative to George Carling. I thought, and like I say, they went on a real arc, which was cool. So yeah, absolutely. To my memory of what the first film was, it absolutely felt like a sequel. A sequel where they took the reins off, which is fine. You know, like you say, respect them for doing something different. And I think on reflection, I don't think the sort of echoing of the time travel would have been as interesting. Although, you know, when you talk about legacy sequel, I again watched the trailer for the third film after seeing this, and it seems from the trailer of the third film that the daughters kind of fulfill the role of going back in time and trying to get people. Which made me go, oh, that's fun. That's echoing the first film. That's nods to that. I don't mind legacy sequels doing that as much, especially when it doesn't. I should caveat that. I don't mind it when. Well, this is incredibly personal, so I accept that. But I don't mind that when it's a film like this, where it's, you know, if Star Wars does that, you kind of go, no, guys, you got the money, you got the prestige, and you mean so much to the world. You need to do maybe a bit more. Although I fucking love Force Awakens for doing that, because I think it brought the franchise back and made people love it again. So yeah, I don't mind. I'm a bit easier on legacy sequels sort of emulating the first. It's when they go too far and it's, you know, nostalgia bait and all that sort of stuff. But having the girls do it in the third seems all right from someone that's judging the entire movie based on the trailer. That might not be the case.
It depends on like the amount of reverence it's paying, I think, because like you look at something like Ghostbusters Afterlife, where it was like treating every little detail of Ghostbusters lore like it was sacred and not at all just like a goofy movie about some schlubby like rent a kill sort of like guys that are, pest control, ghost pest control. Like the first movie didn't treat itself seriously, so Afterlife always felt weird because it took itself too seriously. That's like a bad example of coming back to the thing. Whereas something like, Force Awakens isn't a bad example. It does retell to a degree in certain wider beats the story of the original, but it's using new characters and they're having a different experience and different character arcs. So it's like echoing it tonally and in the wider broad strokes of the story, but in the details is quite different. And I think that's a reasonably good way to do it. And while I don't think that's always going to leave something like Force Awakens feeling not particularly outstanding, I think in terms of like keeping Star Wars alive for, if you're J.J. Abrams and your goal is like, I want to make sure that in 20 years' time, there are still Star Wars fans, 20, 40 years' time, whatever, that's the movie you do. It resets the dial to zero. It's sort of like, after the prequels, which did something quite different, it's sort of like, this is what a Star Wars movie feels like. Do you remember this? And then we can do something different with, what became Last Jedi, Rise of Skywalker, and sort of then we can explore the world a bit. But let's just reset our palette somewhat. And I remember, I've talked about this before, I think I worked in cinema at the time, and A Force Awakens coming out, and seeing children come out of those screenings in little Rey costumes with lightsaber toys made me very, very happy. So there are definitely ways to do, I think, a legacy sequel where you are echoing the original, as long as I think you're doing something different with the characters and you're not treating the original with complete and unearned reverence. I think there's a balance to be struck there, and I agree with you. I'm usually fairly easy on when they sort of echo the plot of the original when they do a legacy sequel. I think that's okay. So yeah,
for sure. Did you? I've said a few times that I think it was very, very funny. Do you agree with that? How did you find the humor?
Yeah, it's interesting. I must admit, I wasn't laughing a lot in the first chunk of the movie. I started laughing a lot more once we got to death, I think, which is only like 20 minutes in, so it's not a lot. But there's a stretch where I was like, there's only one or two jokes I enjoyed. Like I did enjoy. They're from medieval England, Iowa. That was quite funny. And then the joke I had in my own head when the military guy was still trying to win the chance to get Bill and Ted into the army, because that was in my head that was funny, but for not the reasons the movie intended. But I found the jokes about Missy kind of missed the mark. I thought that was weird. I got a full-on robot chubby was icky, and I didn't care for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Your metal dude was amusing to a degree, I guess. That's probably a joke that would have been funnier at the time, like a pun. And then they call them fags, and then they push them off a cliff and spit on them, which is gross. So I'm like, up until they die, I was like, have I misremembered? Is this movie just not funny? Like, but then they immediately trick Death, and Death starts being like the center of all my favorite jokes. Playing Battleships and Twister with Death is one of the funniest things. William Sadler's portrayal of Death is amazing. Him in the store saying to the guy smoking, "See you real soon," is brilliant. Death getting jealous when they're heaping praise on the aliens and being like, "I made the wigs," that's really funny. There's so many great jokes once you get past that first 15-20 minutes of the movie, like them falling infinitely through that pit and taking a deep breath, playing 20 questions while they fall because they're so bored of falling at that point. That stuff's all great. I do agree the movie is very funny, but I wanted to kind of comment on the fact that it's very much second and third act loaded. The first act really struggles to find its feet comedically for me.
There was one joke, within, I think, the first 4 minutes of the film that really made me laugh, though. So I will defend the first act slightly on the basis of of them bringing Sebastian Bach or Jonas Sebastian Bach, whatever his name is.
Oh, yes.
Thomas Edison, and then Jim Martin from Faith No More.
Yes. Yes, you're right. That was funny. That did make me laugh. I really like this weird future that we have where like they're teaching classes the way Bill and Ted learn. Like Bill and Ted went back through time and got a bunch of famous people and learned from them. And like Rufus's lessons do the same. And I think that's actually kind of genius. Like they not only have they taken on Bill and Ted's like philosophies in life, they've taken on Bill and Ted's like approach to education. But it's the fact it's the Faith No More guy. That's great.
And I mean this with absolutely no criticism to Faith No More, who have released some incredible songs. But how much did they luck out with that in terms of future-proofing that gag?
Yes.
Because Faith No More, like if that had been someone from a band that sort of disappeared from view, then that joke doesn't hold up because you're like, who's that band? I think I vaguely heard of them. If that had been a band that went on to, never take a break and constantly release albums, if that had been, I don't know, someone from fucking Green Day or whatever, I'm not even sure if Green Day were around when this film was released. But do you know what I mean? If that had been that, then it's not as funny either because you kind of go, well, they've really cemented. And as much as Faith No More have a place in history and a probably maybe even in like the Hall of Fame or whatever for whatever that's worth, like Faith No More's sort of imprint on music, that joke still absolutely works. And really made me laugh in a way that I don't think it would if it was. I think there's only a few bands that artist could have been from where that joke still plays potentially in exactly the same way it did before. It's really hard to explain, and I want to make it clear I'm not criticising Faith No More. They're brilliant, but there's something about it being Faith No More that really works for that.
No,
joke.
they do sneak a couple of gags in the first minute or two that do work actually, because before it sort of gets to like essentially once we get to Bill and Ted, I didn't find much to find amusing until later on. But that opening scene, because that also has the Benjamin Franklin, Aretha Franklin joke, which I referenced at the start of this podcast, and that is just an objectively funny joke. Like the idea that we're just like bringing the Franklins, like from history. I also enjoy that when they bring out the guy from Faith No More, they also bring out some celebrity that doesn't exist yet as well, that's historical to them in the far future, but hasn't happened in our time. And they describe the invention they created, and it's just like absolute gobbledygook. Like those three jokes, pretty quick fire, are all quite good, to be fair. So yeah.
I just to say, because I fact checked myself, no, Faith No More have been eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame since 2011, but they have never been considered. They've not been nominated or anything.
They will eventually, right?
Well, it's interesting because apparently this website that I'm on, what is this website? It's called Future Rock Legends, and it categorizes this thing called Hall of Fame indicators. And it has Rolling Stone 500 albums, Rolling Stone 500 songs, Rolling Stone cover, Saturday Night Live, major festival headliner, Songwriters Hall of Fame, Big Four, Grammys. And only one is ticked, which is Saturday Night Live. Interesting.
Interesting. How did we feel... How do we feel about some of the like less appropriate stuff of the early part of the movie as well? The gay panic stuff... the use of the phrase robot chubby, and the continuing weirdness of Missy as a character and attempting to extract humor from that, which, look, I didn't love it in the first movie. That like a girl he once asked out was now going out with his dad, but the idea that she's left his dad and is now going out with the other one's dad, what are we doing? Movie, what are you doing?
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not good. Like, obviously, it's not good at all.
Yeah, what a weird series of choices. And I think they stuck out. And I know that the other two are done by the evil Bill and Ted, so I think a person could argue the villains are the ones that are doing like saying the inappropriate things like robot chubby and fags, which is obviously an awful thing to hear the characters say. And I have to unfortunately, because we're in a weird position where I have to use the word, because you can't say the F word or people just think you mean fuck. So it's a tricky situation, because I think like, in the grand scheme of movies we've reviewed that have not aged well, the first Bill and Ted aged delightfully well. There was a little weirdness with the Missy plot, but we were like, I don't know, like the movie kind of acknowledges it's weird. It's kind of, I guess that makes it okay a little to some degree. I think, along the lines of that. But there wasn't anything else outright inappropriate in that movie. But yeah, Robot Chubby stood out. And the gay panic stuff sort of stood out to me, because that felt mean-spirited in a way the first movie wasn't. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair. It doesn't feel in line with the be excellent to each other mantra, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 100%. How do we feel about the? How did you feel about the villain, Dean Anomalous?
It's difficult because they're not really the villain for most of the film. Like, they're just a sort of presence, and then they appear at the end. Given what the movie is, given what the tone of the movie is, fine. I've got nothing against the villain. I think the actor knows what movie they're in, and they're playing to that, and that's fine. I think the villains, in a way, arguably are more the bad robot versions, who again serve a purpose. Like, I just think and I don't mean this as a criticism, they arguably maybe the villains in some ways are a little bit pantomime. Arguably maybe, the depth and the reasoning for them doing what they're doing is arguably a little thin. But again, the movie sets a tone where that's fine. I think, in many ways it's a live-action cartoon. So these are live-action cartoon villains, and that's fine. I think that's what they were going for. I think they achieved that well. I think the other than the kind of, as you've already said, highlighted, the stuff, the really negative stuff about the robots and the sort of, their treatment of characters, which I would... early in the morning for me, apologies, would take out. Other than that, it's fine. It suits what the movie is delivering. All joking aside, I know I've made a few negative references to it, but as a fan of time travel and timey-wimey, I don't even mind the sort of, but I win and give myself a key, and then he shoots, and it's like, you stink, or whatever it is, and they're like, it can only be done by the winner, and we're the winner, like all that stuff. I enjoyed.
Yeah, I thought that idea was really fun, like the idea that, like, they gave him the key and the gun as a sort of like I'm trying to think of the word, like a false, like, to give you like a false,
like a misdirect
almost. Yeah, like a misdirect, like because it was all just to sort of misguide him, so he thought he was winning, but obviously they're right. Both teams don't get to go on with the time machine to then leave stuff. So, because I actually, when he started doing stuff, I was thinking, well, wait a minute, how are you gonna, if they win, and then the movie resolves that and makes that part of its solution? And I think that's actually really clever. Like, it's it's a slightly different take on it from the first movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. How did you find the villains? Do you agree with me that they fit the movie?
Yeah, I think they're pretty straightforward. I think you're right. I think it's a cartoony movie. You need a cartoony villain. You need a guy cackling from a chair or doing, whatever. And they kind of do like a funny, subtle joke with him, where at the beginning of the movie, Rufus refers to him as like his teacher, and you think, oh, like he was like, someone really important in his life. And then later on, he reveals he was his PE teacher.
Yeah, that was good.
Which is, sorry, I had to step away from the microphone, which is like a really, like, objectively, that's just a very funny joke. I've been joined by the cat. This happened on the last podcast we recorded here, but people listening to this won't have heard that because it wasn't a rewound review. It was a different podcast. But there's a cat in the place that I'm currently recording that really likes to ignore me throughout the day and really likes to interact with me while I'm recording a podcast. And What have they got? I mean, to be fair, the cat sat with me while I watched Bill and Ted today. Just likes to be involved, is how Nadia describes it. Just likes to be involved. What are you doing? Comes have a look, and then eventually wanders off. Oh, it's under me now. Hello, kitty. There we go. It's a very good cat, to be fair. Although, apparently in Australia, it's illegal or like against like the local like legislation for the cats to be out after a certain time. And the cat wouldn't come in last night. Like, it was hidden in the bushes, and we couldn't quite get it. And it passed the time that it was supposed to be out, and we were like, "Oh, law-breaking kitty! this kitty's a criminal now. The popo are out for this cat."
I mean, like, isn't it part of your responsibility to look after this cat? So, I'm not sure. I think you should, presumably, if the people who you're doing that for came back and you were like, "Oh yeah, sorry, cat's been taken away for being out." Like,
yeah, I'll be honest,
I thought you should be taking that problem more seriously, Dan.
I don't think it's an enforced rule, if I'm being completely honest. They were saying themselves that, like, sometimes it's just, it's a cat. It's impossible. You can't control a cat. Well, anyone who's owned a cat will tell you it is not possible to control a cat. So I think that rule has a bit of flexi and understanding built into it, and I don't think they actually go around with a big net catching criminal cats.
Well, Dan, if you were looking after my cat, I'd like you to be basing that on more than what you think is the case. Quite frankly,
it's a good cat. We like Miko. Hello, Miko. Aww. Come for some cuddles, I think. Anyway, cat talk.
And I'd just like to say hello to the judge and the jury when this is being played in Australian court as evidence for Dan's lackadaisical attitude towards the cat being out at the stated times. So hello to you all. I hope you're having a good day.
I hope they're having a good day too. Also, not guilty.
And I thank you. I thank you for the listens, because thanks to this jury of 12, then the listenership of Rewind Reviews has gone up by about 11. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so that's about, what, 50%? Mm-hmm. They've almost doubled our listenership. But also, not guilty. Not guilty. If I could sway the jury. Oh man, I'm going to get done for jury tampering now as well. I mean, this is just...
They let you into the country, and quite frankly, you have no respect for their laws.
Immediately, this cat has just come and, like, curled up in my arms and is rubbing its head on the bottom of the microphone, and now it's being like obscenely cute in a way that I'm like, why aren't you this cute and this interested in playing and, like, interacting with me the rest of the time? It's why is it when I record a podcast that you decide that is the time to come and be petted and be cute? Outrageous cat. Anyway, so I think you're right about the villains getting us back on track. I think they're cartoony and it works. I don't think they're in the movie a huge amount, so they don't need to be particularly in depth. The idea that there's just someone who doesn't like the Bill and Ted society is a perfectly sensible explanation. Somebody who doesn't like the society that their teachings has created, trying to go back in time, sort of Terminator style, to undo it and change the future, makes perfect sense. It's a good motivation. His plan's a bit questionable. Make a robot version of Bill and Ted and have them not give the speech that changes the world isn't brilliant as plans go, I guess. Wouldn't it just be easier to send any old robot back to kill Bill and Ted? Once Bill and Ted are dead, you don't need a fake Bill and Ted to live out Bill and Ted's lives. It's very, do you know what I mean? Like it was such a strange choice, but fine. It's a kids movie. We can't have the plot of Terminator. I understand. That's just the reality of it. So yeah, no, I think he's fine. I think he's played quite well. I know the actor that played Denomulus regretted being in this movie. Basically, he didn't like the movie. He thought it seems like he thought it was very silly, and he expressed multiple times throughout his career that he'd rather that he didn't do this, which is a shame because I think he gives a good performance. I think he passed away a few years ago, so that's a shame. But not everything is for everyone. I mean, Alec Guinness hated those Star Wars movies, didn't he? So
yeah. But I imagine Alec Guinness was probably comforted by more checks than this fella was.
Yeah, I mean, every time you say the words Star Wars, his family get a check. So he was very smart.
I didn't say it at the time, but I absolutely echo your thoughts about the spitting. It's grim and horrible.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, we didn't talk about it as much, but what a gross joke! Like, that's not even like a good gross out joke. It's just like it's just needlessly disgusting. Very peculiar. I don't know why that's in there. Little details that I enjoyed. When in one of my favorite scenes in the movie, actually, when Bill and Ted possess his dad and the other police guy. When his dad does the air guitar, it doesn't sound like a modern to the 90s air guitar. It sounds like sort of like an acoustic guitar from like 20 years earlier, and I think that's really good. It's such a nice little detail. Like, they could have just done the normal air guitar sound. I wouldn't have thought about it twice, but that attention to detail is adorable.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's great.
It's a really fun scene, by the way. Like, one of my favorite scenes in the movie, actually. And it's clear those two actors are having an absolute blast acting like Bill and Ted in that context. It's very good.
Yeah, that's very good.
One other thing I do want to talk about, because we were talking earlier about some of the like less appropriate moments of the movie. One of the moments of the movie I really, really enjoyed. They do undercut it slightly minutes later, but we'll come to that as well. But I really loved. There's a moment when the evil usses, as they are dubbed in this movie, sort of being a bit heavy-handed with the two girls. Like while making out with them, and the two girls get up and are like, absolutely not. And Bill and Ted as ghosts are like, go girls. Like, they're being supportive in that moment. They're proud of them for like saying, I'm backing out of that. And like, I just thought that was a really nice way to tell us that this Bill and Ted are Bill and Ted, the original and the best. Were definitely supportive of the girls standing up for themselves in the wake of, pushy guys. I just thought that was a very nice message to send. Now, they do undercut that message a few minutes later by having a joke about Bill and Ted looking down a lady's shirt because of the angle they have, which is unfortunate. So, you give with one hand, movie, you take with the other.
I thought the proposal scene was quite sweet as well.
Yes,
I don't know why, but I enjoyed that. I thought that was quite nice.
I always like about that scene that it's just like they're both giving the same speech, just separately. It's great. Yeah. Those two are just so attuned to each other. That was very funny to me. Do you want to have anything else, or do we start looking at Triv? Let's have a look. I do enjoy that this movie sort of plays on the events of the first movie by having our Bill and Ted don't look like idiots when the other Bill and Ted show up by not being suspicious, because in the last movie they met a Bill and Ted from a time travel situation, not a science fiction situation. So I like that is the explanation given in this movie for why they don't immediately be more suspicious of the of the evil usses, which I thought was a really great idea.
Nice touch. And they explained that in a really accessible way as well, if you hadn't seen or couldn't remember the first film. I'd remembered that point, but I felt that was very accessible.
Yeah, agreed. Let's see, have I got any other notes? Oh, sorry, yeah. Hey, movie, at the end when everyone's getting a little shout out from Bill and Ted for being on the adventure and contributing to and being in the band. You forgot the girls. They're like our dancers over there, the robots, and our support back there, the two aliens that built them, and of course our bassist, Death, and I'm Bill and that's Ted. The drummer and the keyboardist just not mentioned. Don't worry, it's only your future wives.
They give with one hand, they take with the other. What did you, in terms of things before Triv, what did you think? This has got to be, well, I suppose it's not, but I can't think of examples. What did you think of the credits, gags in the papers telling the further story but with gags, Death going solo, all of that stuff. I thought that was good. I thought that was effective. I thought everything within it was funny. I forgot the girls again, but I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because obviously they have to unpick some of this, I think, in Face the Music, because this implies.
I watched the trailer for Face the Music and was like, oh, they're undoing the sort of the montage at the end then.
Right, and that is like a shame. Because I mean, they don't really undoing, not quite. It's so my to sort of say it in a vague way that doesn't like spoil Face the Music. I think what essentially they're implying is that they do become a successful band. That really happens. They do tour. All the stuff that happens in those headlines is real. It's just not the thing that unites the world. It's a specific song they ultimately write that does it. And this performance is sort of the start of their success, which gives them the platform to do that. But, I do a little bit... Oh, 1 second. The cat now wants to exit the room, and the door will not open for the cat. 1 sec. Go on, cat. There you go. I want to just point out that since the cat came in to this moment, the cat was lying between me and the microphone. Just waiting to be petted. Just enjoying a good petting. So I if anyone could hear the scuffling of the cat... Oh, it's trying to get back in. I don't know how to win this. I can't win this game, cat. What do you want from me? Okay, it's got what Nadia calls a case of the zoomies, because when I opened the door just then, it ran off. Anyway, I completely lost where we were. Oh dear, that's unfortunate. Oh, the newspaper things. So the next movie kind of has to unpick it a little bit, because some of these papers do imply that the world is improving as a result of Bill and Ted, and it's the ones that are really the problem aren't the ones that show Bill and Ted succeeding. They're ones that are like air guitar found to improve, climate change, and world unites. Those kinds of ones are the bigger problem for the next movie, rather than just Bill and Ted play the Grand Canyon, Bill and Ted go to space, Bill and Ted. The stock market crashes because there's a rumor they're going to split up. Which they're all very funny and in the context of this movie work perfectly fine. But when you want to then do a sequel, you sort of have to do a little tiny bit of unpicking for the ones that imply they changed the world. But I think they're really good. I think they're fun, and it's interesting they play a cover song at the end and not a song they've written. I think if I'd have been writing this movie, I'd have been tempted to write an original song and be like, "Oh, it's the song that unites the world, not the thing." But that's kind of what they end up doing with Face the Music. I think it works pretty well.
I think the notion. I think in some ways you can never match the setup of that. So just hearing them start a song and then it fading away to those headlines, I think would have been I think would have been what I'd have been pushing for. But yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, though, one thing I do like about this movie, and again, slightly unpicked by the next one, is that, in a weird way, the villain creates the circumstances in which they can change the world. Because he sets off...
Yeah, I really like that as well.
He sets off the events in motion that lead to them being on that stage. They get a good reception from the audience, because obviously... the audience got a little show first with robots exploding and stuff like that. So it puts the audience on their side. Then he brings them a time machine, which allows them to learn their instruments. Then, he turns all the cameras so the whole world can see what's happening. And therefore accidentally creates the thing he was trying to prevent. And that's what's really funny, is if he hadn't intervened at all, they would have gotten to Battle of the Bands. No one would have seen it. They wouldn't have been able to play. And it just would have been a flop. So I love it when in a time travel story where the villain trying to prevent a time thing from thing from happening historically ends up being the catalyst for that thing. The movie doesn't really point it out, and I think that's fine. It's there. So yeah, one of my preferred elements of this story. And that if you don't put that montage at the end, then it doesn't that doesn't land as well. I don't think, because then you don't get the impression that them being seen on everyone's screens had an impact. So yeah.
Yeah, agreed. In that case, Dan, let's triv it up.
I'm going to give you some trivia. So I don't have a huge amount of trivia, but we'll cover what we've got. Let's see. Yes, okay. So the original title for this movie was Bill and Ted Go to Hell, but this was changed. So originally it was changed. They people claimed because of the America being quite a religious country, objections to the use of the word hell. But in an interview, Alex Winter actually addressed that the title Go to Hell didn't really work anyway, because they're only in hell for like 5 minutes. He said that would be like calling the first movie Bill and Ted Go to the Circle K, which is true. So, yeah, I mean, maybe they just changed it because it didn't really reflect the actual movie as a whole, which would be fair.
Yeah. Which is fine. That makes sense, to be fair.
I think so. The director declined to return because he thought this was almost a parody of a movie that was already a parody.
Which I think is valid.
Yeah, I think so.
An enjoyable parody, but that absolutely fits as a description for this film, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's funny because that's how he felt before they even shot this movie. So he knew, he really knew. During filming, I tried to find out more information about this, whether it halted production, what the situation was, unclear, details missing. But during filming, Keanu Reeves collapsed in his trailer and was hospitalized briefly with an arm infection.
Oh shit!
Yeah. He was fine and continues to be a legend to this day, which is an opinion I will hold until he's cancelled, in which I will immediately then say I always thought he was terrible.
Yeah, just to
cover my bases.
If that has happened in the future, just mentally block out whichever one is relevant. Yeah.
No, he seems pretty safe, but who knows, right?
Yeah, for sure. Who knows? Yeah.
But on the grounds of the information we have right now, he's not high on my list of people we should be worried of getting found out.
No, I think he's a pretty.
He's
as safe a bet as anyone is.
Yeah, absolutely. Seems like a delightful man. The film's distributor, Orion Pictures, were on the verge of bankruptcy months before the release of this movie, and were actually selling off the rights to several movies they'd made in an attempt to sort of stabilize themselves. And actually, at one point, Columbia Pictures were going to acquire this film from them. But after careful consideration, Orion actually kept the film because they had faith in it. What's interesting about that is the movie did end up making profit, but not massive profit. So they made it on a $20 million budget, and it made back $38 million domestically. There's no data on its worldwide release, so that 38 million is actually not the whole picture. They will have made several million elsewhere also, but there's no clear figure on how much they spent on marketing. So I don't know if this movie was a massive moneymaker. It probably did go into profit, but it's really hard to tell if that was the correct gamble. Well, we know it wasn't, I guess, because Orion did ultimately fold, but I don't know how close to the release of this movie Orion folded. You know what? Let's find out. When did Orion... when did they fold?
I thought I saw the Orion logo on the trailer for the third film.
Yeah, because they were then bought by Amazon years later. I think. I think they folded, and then someone bought the rights and then revived them. So yeah, so their original run was from 78 to when they folded, and then they were brought back 11 years ago in 2013. But they died in... Oh, they survived until 99. So they didn't fold in the immediate aftermath of this movie. So there you go. Fair enough. The brand is now owned by Amazon, I believe. Although the imprint, I should say,
right, fair enough.
And all of its intellectual property it's been sold a few times. I think at one point it was owned by MGM, but then MGM got bought by Amazon. I remember this because that's how Amazon got hold of James Bond. So yeah, MGM bought Orion and just kept its back catalogue and access to its IP, and then MGM folded and were bought by Amazon. So there you go.
Fair enough.
It's all very complicated. Companies owning companies. Anyway, when Bill and Ted go to Missy's seance, the two male characters that are around that table, and there are only two, are the creators and writers of Bill and Ted. Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon. Chris is the guy in the white shirt. Ed is the guy
nice touch.
with glasses. Yeah, I think that's nice. They also managed to get themselves into one of them into the movie another way. Denomulus, the villain, is an anagram for Ed Solomon's name. Oh no, it's actually not an anagram. So it's his name spelled backwards.
Fair play.
So there you go. Let's see. Oh, did Bill and Ted
I'd
play
have loved to have been in the writer's room for this film. Honestly, man. What should we call the villain? I don't know. What's my name backwards? Let's do that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't not respect that, can you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a compliment.
As choices go.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not. It's not a criticism. I think it's great.
Yeah, no, I'm on board with it. Let's see. Oh yeah, so when Bill and Ted play games with death to win back their lives, it's a reference to The Seventh Seal, which is a movie from 1957, in which a knight plays chess with death for his life. William Sadler, who plays Death, has a second role in the movie. He plays the Englishman in the Battle of the Bands when we're going to all those shots of different countries. What I love about the Englishman one is he has got very visible Marmite next to his television, so you really know it's England. And then in the background, it's Weetabix. Just so you really know he's English. What's funny about that is in those scenes, he's obviously got a wife and child. Those are actually William Sadler's real-life wife and daughter in those roles. So that's fun.
Yeah, nice. That is fun.
He got to bring his family for a little bit of a shoot. They got, I don't know if his wife is like an actress or not, but even if not, that's even more fun. She got to spend a day on the set, go film a couple of scenes, do a little dance. Yeah, I'm sure they had a good time. That's lovely. Interesting one here, just a little link for you. The mall with the building emporium that's used in this movie is the same mall that Doc Brown shows Marty the DeLorean in Back to the Future.
Oh, that's cool. That's a nice little detail as well.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's intentional or not. Well, one thing I forgot to mention, actually, if you're talking fun details, when the phone booth appears at the, whatever it's called, Kmart or whatever that the shop is that they keep showing up outside of, you can see on the ground, near where it lands, a different marking from the previous movie from when it landed in the same spot. So they've repainted on the marking from when the time machine showed up from the first movie in the exact same spot. That is good attention to detail because I would not have noticed or given a shit. So, again, 10 points. Really cool thing.
That's good.
A really cool thing I figured. I sort of figured it out on my second viewing, and then when I did the triv, I confirmed it. They do the effect in which Bill and Ted are drained of color in camera. It's not a computer effect where they've desaturated them because they're in scenes where everyone else is in full color. So what they did, and it's so simple, is they had the costume department make versions of their costumes that were just monochrome, the color stripped out, and then they just used makeup to make their skin paler so they look monochrome in colorful scenes. So simple.
That is alarmingly simple.
Yeah, awesome. Because it looks great in the movie to the point where you assume digital trickery was involved. No, dead simple. Bit of makeup, costume department making colourless versions of their outfits, and smartly choosing very colourful outfits to begin with so that when you drain them of colour, there's a contrast. Worked really well, looks great. The only way you could even notice, and I had a close look, was that sometimes Alex Winter's hair still has its colour. Like, they might have put some powder in it to sort of take a little of the colour out, but it looks like that either that comes out sometimes or in certain lightings that's not as effective, and you can still see his natural hair colour coming through. But unless you're looking like a nerd, because you're a nerd like me that was like, how did they do it? Pausing the scene to have a close look, then you're never going to spot it. So it's, really well done. 10 points to everyone involved on the filmmaking side there for that, because that's really cool. This is a fun one. The mountain in which Bill and Ted are taken to and killed by the evil Usses is actually the same mountain where Captain Kirk is seen climbing it in the episode Arena from 1967, which is what they're watching at their apartment. So they're watching William Shatner.
Big fan of that attention to detail.
They're watching William Shatner at those rocks, then that's where they go to die. It's great. That is my favourite. And I don't know if that's just a coincidence or if that's deliberate. I'd assume it's deliberate because that's really specific. But yeah, that's really fun.
I like that. Like I say, that's good attention to detail.
Yeah, there's so much of that in this movie. They definitely really worked hard on this movie, you can tell. One thing we haven't said, because I guess we said it for the first one, but it's worth adding. Performances are obviously amazing. We haven't really talked about it, but Keanu Reeves and Alex Winters, just incredible. And you really believe their friendship and how close they are at all times. They sell it really well. They're just like on top form here. This is, any criticisms I have of this movie definitely doesn't surround any of the performances, because I think everyone is just doing a really good job. And particularly as well, actually, William Sadler is just so perfect for Death. I can't even express how good he is at that role in words. So yeah, this is a beautifully cast movie. We usually do mention that when the cast are good, which is a lot of the time. Very rarely do we go, oh, the cast were awful. But yeah, really good here. I think when they're bad, we just are less likely to comment on it. I don't think all the young cast of Avatar: Way of the Water are great. Don't you think, bro? It's yeah, I know. And I do slightly owe you an apology for that, because I think you brought up to me on the phone, separate to the podcast, how often they said bro. And I was like, I don't think that bothered me too much. But I've seen several things since where people have brought up how irritated they were by that. So clearly it didn't bother me as much, but you were spot on for an issue for a lot of people with that movie.
Yeah, well, I will say I think they were really, that's one where I wouldn't want to judge their performances on that script. So I wouldn't be shocked if those actors wowed me in something else.
And this is what's tricky, I think, sometimes. And the reason that it feels like we're always just complimenting the acting is I think that is what happens. I think we compliment it when it's good, which is often, I think there's not a shortage of really talented people in Hollywood. Shocker. And they have a lot of choice because a lot of people are getting into acting, so it's often very easy to get the right person for the right role. Occasionally, we'll say someone's miscast. We very rarely comment when someone's acting doesn't work on any of our podcasts, and I think the main reason for that is exactly what Chris said. Sometimes it's the writing, and sometimes it's the direction. Acting isn't always 100% the fault of the actor. I've seen good actors give bad performances, bad actors give good performances because of elements outside of their control. In fact, we're going to be having a lot of conversations over the next, let's say, 2 weeks from now, for following 3 weeks, about performances and acting based on script and poor direction. That's going to be coming up a lot in the 3 movies we cover at the end of this series. But yeah, often I think you can't blame the actor and always say that's a bad performance. Now, admittedly, with Avatar, they're young as well, which makes it also a bit like, they'll get better. Same where the performances weren't great in the first Harry Potter movies, but all 3 of those leads grew into very fine actors and are now, doing great work. So, bunch of reasons it happens that way. But yeah, we're less likely to be critical of acting than other stuff. So yeah, just
for sure.
Just to cover that. Let's see. Oh yeah, so in a deleted sequence, the evil robot Usses used devices to recreate Bill and Ted's personal hells in the real world and sent them after the heroes. And in that version of the movie, Bill and Ted end up having to face their fears and get rid of them. Bill gives his granny a kiss on the cheek, and Ted calls his brother and apologizes for stealing his Easter sweets. And then both boys treat Oates, which I think he must be the army guy, with kindness and friendship rather than terror. I don't know why that was cut, to be honest with you. I think that would have improved the movie.
Yeah, I think that sounds quite nice. I'd like to have seen that.
Yeah. apparently, according to one of the early drafts of the script, this is the fourth draft, but I don't know what. I don't know. I don't know where the author of this trivia has confirmed it was specifically in the very fourth iteration of the script. Maybe they have. Yeah, whatever. But apparently, one of the guys from the future that was brought into the class at the beginning that was Tom Petty, and Rufus was going to dub him Sir Tom Petty, which I really like, and I'm sad they didn't get to do.
Yeah, that is a shame.
Yeah. The evil robot Usses, in one version of the script, were actually supposed to kill Bill and Ted at the Battle of the Bands, whereupon the boys would invoke their wins against death and get resurrected. So basically, the movie's structure would be different. The evil Bill and Ted would show up the night of Battle of the Bands, maybe kill them backstage, they'd go on the adventure, and then come back to finish Battle of the Bands. It doesn't sound massively different structurally, other than just there's a lot less time for them to do stuff. You'd be wondering how they crammed the events of this movie into one night, I guess. But yeah, fine. So yeah, this is an interesting one. So the film actually came in number 2 at the American box office, behind Terminator 2: Judgment Day, which incidentally is a movie this movie parodies by having the evil robot duplicates of Bill and Ted put sunglasses on before time traveling. So there's a little reference to Terminator 1 in this movie, and it came out pretty much the same weekend as Terminator 2. Got trounced by it, but as I said, did all right for itself. $38 million on a $20 million budget isn't bad. So, Chris, it's everyone's favourite time of the week. Is Cars Exist?
No.
So, very quickly, the van the boys drive, as we all know, Chris, as me and you, we both studied the muffler of this vehicle and were able to identify that, of course, the van was a 1983 Ford Escalade, an E350 chassis. You can tell which chassis again from the bumper at the back. It's very different to the version that came out in '87, obviously.
Well, of course, obviously.
Don't be ridiculous. And of course, the Porsche, the evil duo Steel, is of course a Porsche. It is a 1979 911 SC. It's a cool car. I like the 911. Nice. It's a cool looking car. I don't know a lot about cars, but I do like that. I do like that car. And then a special sub thing. Guitars Exist. Yeah. I left a gap so you could have a little guitar, a little Bill and Ted.
I appreciate that.
I thought you'd want to get in on the fun. So the guitars that Bill and Ted play are a 80s Gibson SG Special and a Gibson Flying V67 reissue. Ted plays 2 different color versions of his guitar, but Bill keeps the same guitar throughout the entire movie. So they're implying Ted has 2 different color versions of the exact same guitar. Where they had the money to buy the same guitar twice in 2 colors, I do not know. They do not seem wealthy. And the opening of the movie kind of implies that they're not particularly wealthy because they're worried about sort of, supporting their families if they do marry the princesses in the opening scene. They also imply they have jobs. What do they say they would do? They work at like an ice cream place or something? There's like, your yogurt stand or something? There's like a really weird stray line that implies that they have like weekend jobs or something. Anyway, yeah, that's all the triv.
Yeah, I can't remember that. So I believe you, but I can't remember it. That's the reference, but I'm sure it's there.
I'm gonna see if I can find
I'm feeling
it
good, man.
In the script.
Are we recommending? I'm recommending this movie. I think if you're a fan of the first one, it's fun. It will, it may wash over you slightly, but it's worth watching. It's a fun old romp.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think. Oh wow! I found an early draft of the script that's called "Bill and Ted Go to Hell."
Oh, that's quite cool.
Oh, does this script have the line of dialogue in question? Because obviously this is an older version of the script. Doesn't look like it does. That's obviously a line they added in a later version. Interesting. Anyway, yeah, I think I would go ahead and say I recommend this. I just think like I think it's deeply flawed. It's not as good as I was hoping it would be, and I think if you go in with like the mindset that it might not quite live up to your childhood expectations and memories of it, I think you'll be in a better place with it, if that makes sense. Because I did find that disappointing. But I think if you go in with the right expectations, there's a lot of fun to be had. We did talk a lot about a lot of great things that are in this movie. It's a bunch of fun in many, many ways. So I don't want to imply that it doesn't work at all. I think the problems it's got are actually quite small in number, but quite major. I think that's the issue. The issue is it does have a pretty fundamental, like the movie working. Fundamental to stopping the movie from working. But yeah, it is what it is. I found another version of the script where they talk about giving blood. Oh, there you go.
That's the title of the movie.
In terms of no. In terms of like the job thing. But here we go. I found the line. We can't raise a family on the money from pretzels and cheese. So that they clearly work at a place called Pretzels and Cheese.
Fair enough.
I guess I'm recommending it. I mean, look, it's still a boatload more fun than like having to sit through like Dumb and Dumber 2 or like, you know, a bunch of the other movies we've covered. I'd still rather watch this than Die Hard 2. And I know you've got a soft spot. I'm not trying to dig that in. I think it's just literally another sequel that I could think of that I didn't care for.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that's fair. That's
recommend.
fair. So there we go. Are you ready, Dan? Because we promised what we'd do is spin the wheel and leave this choice.
I thought we were making a choice. I forgot this. So for those who don't know, a few weeks ago, Chris made the absolutely insane decision, because this is sequel season. We're just covering sequels. So it's actually a reasonably limited list of movies we can cover, because it's sequels to movies we've already reviewed, because we're not just going to jump in on the second movie if we've not done the first. So we had a list, I think it was like 30, 40 movies when we started. We decided to rule out legacy sequels because we've already done a couple of those. Obviously, a bunch we've now covered because we're 8, 9 episodes or whatever, 7, 8 episodes into this run. There is one more choice that Chris has left. But the last time we did this, we both said the only movie on the list we didn't want to cover was Dr. Dolittle 2, and we span the wheel. It came up Dr. Dolittle 2. We span it again. Dr. Dolittle 2. We span it a third time and it still said Dr. Dolittle 2. And then to check the wheel wasn't broken, we span it a fourth time and it did give us a different result. But holy hell, the universe wanted us to cover Dr. Dolittle 2. And I now fear the wheel. I may start a religion around the wheel. The wheel decides all. The wheel is sacred. The wheel knows. So
yeah, I've narrowed it right down. So like let's spin it and see what we land on. I think of the movies on there now, there's only one choice that we probably don't actually want to do. So let's.
Do you want to? Wait. No, let's. I mean, because last time we said that, we then got it, and I think that's funny. We have to at least voice what movie that is. What movie is on there that you're like, I wouldn't want to cover that?
Well, the movies on there are Final Destination 2, Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, Clerks 2, Mallrats, Hot Fuzz, and Mr. Bean's Holiday. So I assume the one we don't really want is Turbo, a Power Rangers movie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that movie. But, I mean, I that would be mercifully short, would it not? At the very least.
Yeah, I assume so. Hold on, let's check it out. So Turbo, a Power Rangers movie.
Can I guess? Because a movie like that surely isn't longer than like an hour and 15 minutes. Because that was like a straight-to-DVD movie, no?
It's actually longer than Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey.
Fuck off. You're lying.
It's 99 minutes long, and I believe Bill and Ted was 93, wasn't it? Hold on.
99 minutes long? This is an hour and 39 minutes of movie.
Yeah. Bill and Ted was 93 minutes. So it's longer than the movie we've just reviewed.
All right, so press the button and let the wheel pick Turbo Power Rangers movie three times in a row. Go on. Spin that wheel.
It's gone past it. It's gone past it. It is Mallrats.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yes. Okay. So we're talking, you know what? That's a really interesting choice. because we've talked a lot of this season about different kinds of sequels that we've covered. We've covered the sort of direct sequel like this. We've covered like the legacy sequel. We're about to cover prequels. The kind of sequel we've never really had a chance to cover here is this sort of sidequel. This like idea of this is set in the same universe, but it's no longer those characters. That's a really fun one. I actually approve that choice. That gives us a bit more range in the kinds of sequels we've covered.
Yeah, and I think it's the more, because it sort of also puts us down a path, and I think this is the more interesting way to review Kevin Smith chronologically, as opposed to jumping straight to Clerks 2. So, yeah, I'm down for that. And it is, Dan, that is 94 minutes. So smack bang in the middle of, well, nearly smack bang in the middle of Bill and Ted 2 and Turbo, a Power Rangers movie.
Yeah, but I feel like at least with like, because you know, I haven't seen Mallrats in quite a while, but I have seen it in my adulthood. To some degree. I definitely have, at the very least, I saw it in my 20s. I think probably maybe even since then. But at the very least, 20s, and enjoyed it. And I feel like the threshold for like, oh God, will this hold up, is usually like late teens, early 20s. But if I've seen it in my mid to late 20s, which I think I have, and enjoyed it, which I remember doing, then I think it probably does hold up. I don't think a movie that I've seen, you know, within the last decade is likely to, you know, have changed massively in my estimation in 10 years. You know what I mean? Compared to if the last time I saw this movie was, you know, I was 22, I'd be a bit worried.
Yeah, I think there's some stuff that doesn't age well. Like, I can name some scenes now that don't age right. In fact, one of the sub-stories in particular, like the running thing with the Ben Affleck character is particularly dodgy, so I'm not as confident to say it definitely holds up. I'd forgotten
about that until you just said it. I'd forgotten about that until you just said it. Well, we'll see. Let's find out, guys.
Keanu Reeves it. Based on your own judgment, just block out whatever thing is wrong that Dan said.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, it's good until we realize it isn't, and then we always thought it wasn't.
I don't think it'll be. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah,
let's see.
But yeah, good times were had by all. Come back then for that, and then I mean, at this point, we've said it enough that you already know. But what we are covering following Mallrats is the Star Wars prequel trilogy. I'm extremely excited about covering the Star Wars prequel trilogy. I have deliberately, because I think there's been a bit of a resurgence for like those red letter media reviews of the original Star Wars trilogy, which are like some of the very first and most iconic viral long-form video essay reviews. And while a lot of people took the wrong lessons from the content of those, I think a lot of people thought, oh, angry videos about pop culture are popular, instead of actually there's a lot of really legitimate criticism in these. I've been eager to watch those for a while, and I've been resisting it because I don't 100% remember what they cover, and I don't want them to have informed me. So I'm not just excited to rewatch and discuss those movies. I'm also excited to be free to rewatch those reviews again. So yeah, very exciting to cover. It's very excited to cover those. We're going to be breaking down, and I imagine in painful detail, what does and doesn't work about the Star Wars prequels. And that's going to be fun.
Yep.
Because I stand by...
It's going to be exciting.
I have stood by for a very long time the fact they are not particularly great movies. And there has been a shift in online discourse about those movies. They are being reassessed by many in a more positive light. Let's see if that's still true. I don't think so. But we'll find out. Maybe I'll be surprised. Maybe I'll be like, you know what?
Go on. My big memory opinion going in is that the Phantom Menace is the one that gets, you know, even in that sort of machete order, it's skip the Phantom Menace, and the Phantom Menace is considered the worst. And my opinion going in that I'm intrigued to see if I stick to or not is that Attack of the Clones is a much worse movie than Phantom Menace. So let's see how we feel watching it.
Attack of the Clones is the worst Star Wars movie, in my opinion, at this moment in time, bar none. It's not even close. It's not even close.
Are you including the animated Clone Wars pilot movie thing?
Yeah, I am.
Oh, wow. Oh, you are? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you know what? I would happily watch that again over over. I cannot tell you how much I hate Attack of the Clones in words. It is a genuinely dreadful movie, and I'm really excited to suffer through it and get a chance to rant about it on a podcast. So yeah, that's stuff to look forward to. And of course, we've got a special. So that would the 100th episode will be Revenge of the Sith, and then we got a little 100th bonus episode that we're going to put up, the tail of the tape, which we're excited to go into more detail about close to the time. But thanks everyone for listening. I'll pass over to Chris because he's the one who finishes these.
My name's Chris Pillingham.
My name's Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.